Hello, my fellow readers. This is Dark Symphony 777 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story, and finally, listen to my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the story I am doing a review of is Daily Equestria Life with Monster Girl. It is a Monster Musume and My Little Pony fanfiction written by ST, and this was originally supposed to be my 500th fanfiction review. However, I had to switch tack because, it is massively long, and I couldn't, and it would take way too long to read it, so I switched tack to Silent Ponyville. Figured those would have been easier. Plus, I actually read those stories, so I kind of knew what was up. But this story frustrated me a lot. It's been a long time since I've been frustrated with like any fan fiction on this channel. I think like the last time was, what was it? I think it might have actually been Fallout Equestria. Either Fallout Equestria or Forged Destiny. It's probably Fallout Equestria. And how frustrating it was to get through. And it's such a pain because I wanted to like this story. And I'm not saying that as a fan fiction reader or even a My Little Pony fan. I'm saying this as a Monster Musume fan. I love Monster Musume. It's one of my favorite mangas. One of my manga / animes of all time. I really love Sue. Come on, she's best girl. Come on, everyone loves the slime girl. But so I went into this story with like an open mind. I was like, oh, it's about Centauria. I like Centauria. I think she's a nice character. Not my favorite in Monster Musume, but I think she's perfectly fine. I think that's the more serious character, like everyone Xanius, and that kind of works. And honestly works for her. But I have some problems with this story. A lot of problems with this story. And to kind of get through most of my issues with the story, I have to, before talking about the plot, I have to talk about specifically this writing style. So, this story uses a very heavily purple prose story. Now, what is purple prose? Well, purple prose can be described as overly ornate prose text that may disrupt the narrative flow by drawing undeniable attention to its own extravagant style of writing. Now, I don't think the writing by itself is a problem. Every single type of writing style, whether it be first person, second person, very verbose, purple prose, these types of stories, they can work. There is a track record for this type of story working. If you look at, for example, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, it's a very purple prosy story. But Pride and Prejudice made it work. With this story, and the reason why purple prose kind of gets the bad rep, because purple prose stories get a very, very deservedly bad rep. And again, not saying that these stories can't be good. It's just there's very valid reasons why a lot of people don't like this writing style. Is the fact so the reason why a lot of people don't like this specific style of writing is, one, it's very long-winded. Like you can go like an entire chapter you can easily sum up in a sentence or two. Two, it's very hard to figure out what's going on at times because usually the stories, they tend to be very long-winded. So like not Pride and Prejudice, because it's been a long time since I read that, and I found that story dull. Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is kind of a purple prosy story. I would say like the Narnia stories are more purple prosy, or even like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. I think the author had like a really bad habit of going overboard with that. But purple prose stories, they tend to get the writing get ahead of itself. So it's like the writing comes before everything else. And this is actually, and wait a minute, I just realized I can actually show examples of this from other fan fictions I reviewed. Those being Melancholia by Lady Armister and Misconceptions by Sandstorm 3D. Both of these stories are very purple prosy. Misconceptions is a very badly done purple prose story, but Melancholia is a very good, well done purple prosy story. There are various levels of purple prose. Like some are more elaborate than others. This is more of a traditional purple prose story, but it does have the problem of just just constantly extending the writing to ridiculous degrees and causing. We'll get more into that, but I need to stress one last problem with purple prose stories, and that is it's very hard to figure out if you're actually doing the story right. Purple prose stories have a very obvious, let's call it a noob trap sort of deal, where people like to equate writing these fancy, long-winded like long-winded sentences as quality. However, with proper purple prose, you need to balance these long-winded, stretched out scenes because spoiler, I'm not gonna say anything bad about the pacing. You need to have all of this. It takes a very specific style of pacing. Typically, purple prose stories tend to be very slow paced, so I'm not gonna say anything bad about the story's pacing because it is very slow paced, and that's kind of what these types of stories need to do. But you'll need to combine the slow pace with keeping up everything. There is a lot you need to go through. And if you don't if you don't pace it too fast, it's like, well, you might as well not call it a purple prose story after all. But this story has the very unique circumstance of being the exact opposite. It paces the plot progression and the character progression so slow, so like almost non-existently slow that it becomes a monster chore to get through. And a lot of people, when they first read these types of stories, they're unable to properly figure things out because these stories are despite being the least they're also the most technical stories because you need to figure out the wordplay. You need to be able to read between every single line in order to even get even a elementary grasp of what's going on. And if you don't, then yeah, you're not gonna get it. So that causes something of an issue where if people don't know what they're looking for to check the quality of these types of stories, they're literally not going to be able to see the problems that these stories might cause. But if you do know how to see these issues, they almost become hilarious on how you can easily tell what is exactly wrong with this story with these types of stories. So let's let's just get into the plot, and I'll kind of show you how the issues I have as the story goes along. What is the plot? Well, the plot stars Centauria Shianus. So, for those of you who know what Daily Life with Monster Girls or Monster Musume is, It's about these groups of monster girls. They're living with a guy named Kimihito, and they're all basically trying to acclimate to Japan, the various challenges that they're have to deal with, while also all of them want to jump the guy. They all want to jump Kimihito's bones, except for Lala. She's perfectly content, like waiting for him to die before jumping his bones. It's like no, they want to jump you now. I will wait until you're dead. Okay, good. And it's a very and despite it being like an etchy story because the mangaka originally drew porn and he's like he just kind of got the inspiration from drawing the porn. The author, it actually got popular and it became super popular and all that. And this story, timeline wise, is very like nebulous on where this plot takes place in like the Monster Musume timeline. This one with My Little Pony, this one takes place at least after season 4, so after T-Rex is defeated and all that. But with this, it's just very nebulous because it's manga still ongoing. And you can kind of add anything. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I'm seriously getting off topic. Centauria starts running, basically goes on a morning jog, same old, and she comes across a roadway that she just never goes. She never went through before, so she just decided to go through it. However, while she's going through that alleyway, she gets teleported to Equestria, but in the middle of like nowhere. And then comes the first chapter, Abomination, where she shows up at this place called Palomino, and she gets bum rushed by an entire city because in the context of the story, this story takes place a month after T-Rex just completely wrecked everything. And this is a more politically driven, darker, I guess you could say, cynical version of Equestria, where a lot of people died. Every single Equestrian is suffering some kind of mental trauma because they had their magic zapped by T-Rex. A lot of Pegasus dies because when they were stuck, they couldn't fly anymore and they crashed to the ground, broke their necks, or just died instantly. Anything. Lots of ponies committed suicide because they couldn't get over the trauma over losing their magic from T-Rex. A lot of crazy stuff happens, and the Equestrians never have been unable to forget about it. Now they see this another centaur show up and they assault her. So they tie her up. She tries to defend herself with her plastic sword. She finds out that the plastic sword kind of deflects magic, and then she's sent to a cell in Canterlot. Celestia and Luna talk to her. They realize she's not fully like T-Rex. They're not 100% trusting of her at first. Luna kind of figures it out by going into her dreams and finding out she's really not like T-Rex. And over the course of the story, we find out in terms of the plot, it's really just Centauria just wants to go home. I know you're confused. Let me explain. Centauria at the start, all she wants to do is go home. However, Celestia and Luna think this is in order to try and help her along the way because they can't keep her in the cells forever because they realize she's not exactly a bad person. They decide to try and acclimate her to Canterlot. This causes a lot of friction with the populace, specifically a organization called QNet, who is a unicorn supremacist group. Yes, you heard that right. And they take umbrage with the fact that they're trying to get everyone to accept a centaur being there because they're still traumatized by T-Rex. So they come up with a plan. Have Centauria join the Equestrian Guards. So, they go through the whole train. Centauria goes through like the training with Emery Board, with trying to learn how to do etiquette and trying to figure out the ins and outs and like how life is because she also wants to be a knight, and she's like, oh, we'll talk about Saria's character when we get to it. But there's a lot of waiting around and a lot of really nothing going on in terms of the central plot of Saria wanting to go home. It's really just nothing for a large portion of the story. The plot doesn't really progress, and this kind of gets back to the problem when you have these purple prosy stories and you stretch everything so thin. If you stretch this out so long, you can stretch this out long. Purple prose stories have the benefit of requiring to be slow paced. So I can understand wanting to stretch things out. Stretching things out with the plot, stretching things out with the character, so on and so on. Stretching out with like the world. I can understand the mindset behind that. However, there is a limit to how much you can stretch before apathy sits in. The plot doesn't even attempt to start like the whole plot about Saria going home. And yes, you can also make an argument that the plot is basically Saria wanting to become a guard, but that's more of a character thing rather than a plot thing. The plot doesn't fully start until around chapter 60. That is around roughly 350,000 words into the story. Now, I don't know what the author was thinking, but that is way too long. When you had that long and you barely, if ever, move the plot in any significant way. And yes, there are some minor plot plot devices that do happen that kind of at least shift it a little bit, but they're really really minor. Like the whole like Night Watches, is a pony that basically becomes Saria's one true friend here. Her apartment gets like burned by our assist who worked for QNet. The arts and here's the whole thing with learning on the Emery board, but that's more of a character. That's more of a character point rather than a plot thing. But you can at least make an argument for that. There's a party she goes through that gets disrupted by QNet, not QNet, by Wordia Spinner. Yeah, it's more of a character. That's more of a plot point rather than moving the plot forward. It doesn't really add anything. Anything else? There's the whole decision to become Saria becoming a guard. You can make an argument for that. That's more of a character arc thing rather than a plot arc than a plot thing. But you can make an argument like that. It's just so monstrously nothing. And I will say this: when it comes to this part, the world building itself is phenomenal. These types of stories need to typically tend to have really good world building. And this story and Equestria Life, no exception. It has really good world building. I have nothing that's bad to say about that. It's just the fact that it takes so long. And this is a 100-chapter story. It takes until chapter 60 of a 100-chapter story to have any sort of advancement from the plot at all is atrocious. If you want to be specific, it's specifically 61 chapters, but I'm rounding it out to 60. That's like it takes like 60% before the plot starts. So it's like it's so aggravating because I went through so long with nothing going on with the plot because it's all just world building. There's only so much world building you can do before you just stop caring. So I was like, okay, maybe instead of plot, like, building on the plot, it's building on Saria's character. And no, it doesn't. In fact, Saria's character, is one of the worst main characters I ever read in any fan fiction. Not even in any fan fiction I have seen in any sort of medium ever. Her character is so badly handled. I will say this: on paper, it sounds amazing. Saria's character is basically an exaggerated version of her character in Monster Musume. That's fine. It's an exaggeration. She was abused as a child by her mom because her kind have effectively stagnated and they're kind of just going through the paces. Saria wants to be different. She wants to go out and how she grew up is her mom has basically pushed her so much that mentally she broke. So she blames every little thing on herself, and now she's dragged into a world where everyone's perfectly willing to blame everything on her. It has the making of a really good hero's, like, stereotypical hero's journey. Like she's a broken mare who spent her whole life being a technically neglected by her mother, because every time when she tried something and she didn't win first place, the mother would just ignore her and say, do harder and do faster. And even when she does win, it's like, all right, do it again, but go higher. Like, Saria made it a point, like, every time when she tried to jump over a hoop, instead of saying good job, the mother would just calmly raise the bar higher until she couldn't do it, and then she would berate Saria for not clearing the bar. So that leaves Saria in, like, a very, very fragile mental state. And I thought, okay, so her character arc is going to be that she's going to slowly, kind of, from a mental standpoint, step away from, realize that what her mother did was wrong, and become her own person, and get out of her shadow and get out and kind of heal herself mentally. That actually sounds like a good character. And if her character was done well throughout the story, I could forgive, the whole lack of plot until over halfway through the story. Guess what happens? The author decides, instead of focusing on Saria's character, instead of Saria's growth, focuses entirely on Saria's death. Now, you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, aren't they the same thing? Yes and no. There is some overlap with these two concepts, character growth versus character death, but the most common thing is depth focuses more on her core character and her backstory. So it's like, okay, you have a blank slate and you're trying to fill in, like, the backstory and the motivation behind that. That's character depth. Character growth is the character from the beginning of the story growing into sort of a different character by the end in some way, shape, or form. Again, I would have been let this whole thing slide if it was like a slow burn character, because it's like, okay, that would have been fine, because the author was playing up, like, the realistic angle where she spent so long being abused by her mother in this way that she's pretty much eternalized it. And that's actually a realistic take on mental abuse. Like, I like, that's something I've had to deal with for a long time. I have been getting out, but it took years. But with something like this, there has to be some acceptable gaps. Like, you can't expect the character like this in a story like this to not grow. And as I was reading the story, I realized the author just kept focusing on her backstory and focusing on her depth, but not pushing her forward as a character, as growing. She has a character arc, wanted to become a knight. That's fine. But there's no progress with her character on the growth level because her character is not changing until the very end. I shit you not. I am not joking. When she spends 90, 90, 85 to 90% of the story as more or less such a flat character. You can have all the depth for a character in the world, but if you don't progress that character into growth, into growing as a better person, even slowly, you get apathetic of her character, and you just and at the end, I'm mixing up my thoughts. And when she does actually start growing her character, it can come off as hollow, as unearned, because you don't see the growth. If you, especially in this story, where after so long of nothing going on with Saria outside of depth and outside of a minor character arc of her becoming a knight, she gets a one gigantic thing of character in one chapter where she turns around to go join Night Watch into trying to stop a big riot in the palace. It comes off as unearned because she, even until then, even as the riot was still going on, she didn't really grow. She was still like blaming herself, blaming everything on her, and she didn't get that push to try and change until she's holding the arsonist by the throat with her plastic sword at her throat. At the very end of the story, and no matter how well written you write a story, that is absolutely positively bullshit. There is no defending that. There is no defending zero growth over the course of the entire story and expecting most people to care when she does get admittedly pretty good character development at the very end of the story that comes bumfuck out of nowhere because it was never built up. There were no breadcrumbs. There was nothing to truly connect us to keep us up with her character. So that way, when it did happen, the emotional beats were enough that you can cheer on and just yell in excitement, saying that she finally did it. She finally overcame the mental trauma of her of being raised. It's hollow. It's emotional. It's heatless. It's soulless. It and that's what makes it hard because when we actually get the character development, it's really solid. Like it's a good natural progression of what Saria's character of her endpoint. But there's just nothing. It's just again there you can have only so much depth, especially if you're stretching it over the course of this long a story. There is only so long you can do this before you just stop caring. You can't. There's no defending this. I was so frustrated. Like honestly, until the very end, I was literally going to even trash Saria's character. It's like she's just all depth, no growth until the very end, which made it even worse because you can tell that she did have solid growth. It's just it happens at the very end of the story and comes off as mad. It just like where was that for the entirety of it? It's the same thing it's the same thing with the plot. Once the riot starts and all the slacktivists bum rush into the palace, the plot actually picks up and it gets really good. But it's like, where was all that? Like, all that in the beginning, like throughout the story. Like, where was all that? And I can, with the plot, I can at least defend it because it's like, okay, it was a slow ramp up thing. Fine, but I just can't get behind Seria's character because there is no character. There is no there is no growth of her. It's just nothing. Ugh. Grammar. Grammar is fine. Writing style, it's purple prose. Like, it's as basic as purple prose you can get without it. Like, no. I can't. I don't know how to say this. It's it's like the fake purple prose. The purple prose where you know that it's written well, but once you see the trees beyond the forest, I think that's how the phrase goes. I'm not pretty far with that. You realize it's just a lot of fluff. It's a lot of nothing, just harmless world building. Again, you can have as much world building as you can, but if you're not progressing the story as it's happening, even in minor ways, you just stop caring. It's just there's nothing. Pacing. I can at least say the pacing good. This is Purple Pro stories, like I said earlier. Their whole purpose, they're meant to be slow paced. I have nothing wrong. I have nothing wrong with the story on a pacing level. It's very well done paced. It's a very, very political story, as well as like the detail behind the world. And it's just not. It's just. Part of me wants me to keep complaining about Seria's character because it's like, I don't know. I really wanted to write to like this story, and that's the really sad thing because like this story has a lot of good ideas, and I haven't even touched on like I could probably skip like all the characters that are not Seria, and all of them are actually really well done. I do think Miss Manners as the person who basically started the riot is actually kind of her reasoning behind it is very hilarious and like it makes sense, but it's also very stupid. Just absolutely stupid. Yes, it makes sense in the context of the story. Yes, Miss Manners started to let all the rioters in because she didn't like the fact that Saria slapped her with the boobs. Her admittedly gigantic boobs. I'm thinking there has to be something I'm missing. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, yes! The story is also very inconsistent. There are a lot of themes that are just completely abandoned in favor of more world building. Like there's the whole thing with Saria like when she's training to become a guard, they basically give her a character named Blitzkrieg. I don't know how to pronounce it. Blitzschritz. Basically, it's a ram. She's a ram, and Saria has to study rammed in order to learn how to be a guard with everything. So it's like okay, and then we get like a little build up on like the comparisons between Seria's herd and the Ibex tribe, but that's never touched upon because it's just completely abandoned like partway through the story. Okay, there's the whole idea of falling, which is basically how cutie marks work in this universe. Is the fact that you get a very subtle boost in your either inherited magic or if you're unicorn with like your actual magic in relation to what your cutie mark is telling you. So So it's like, okay, they discuss, for example, dome shields, which is what Shining Armor does. Other ponies can do it, but Shining Armor, because his talent is in those defensive spells, he's able to do it much more quickly and much more efficiently, and doesn't burn as much magic. Falling is the concept of becoming so attuned to your cutie mark that you become obsessed with it. It's like you can't talk about anything unless it relates to the key mark. You can't do anything unless it relates to the key mark, and you become sort of like a shell of your former self because you become an automaton, so to speak. And we're introduced with that through a character named Barty, who is the blacksmith of the palace. So that way we get a chapter where Saria is actually making the mask of steel, and the story is told from that chapter is told from Barding's point of view, and he's talking about how it's just completely sacrilege that she's in the forge building, like, oh, she's putting bone metal into the mix in with the metal, and now she's folding the metal. That's and And then when she finally finishes it, she asks him to kick it. It's like, I will kick it out of my string. And he kicks it, and he actually gets hurt, and he realizes, oh, 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 wait, it didn't bend? He's like, and he's having like he's actually freaking out. It's like, does not compute. And then he calls it Centaur Steel. It's the mask. It's the mask skill, but they don't know that. So I thought, yeah, that's actually a really cool concept. And then it's just completely abandoned for the bulk of the story because, one, this is actually sort of a weird thing that I just realized. They never actually show you what any of the characters' cutie marks are. Even when Centauri gets one, yeah, spoiler alert, she gets a cutie mark in this. They don't actually tell you what it is. Like, okay, so what a Centauri's cutie mark is? I don't know. What can she do? Oh, she can just summon a plastic sword out of thin air, and also plastic hairpins. Because in this world, plastic is like a magic nullifier. It's so. And I was like, okay, that's weird. But anyway, this whole falling down concept doesn't show up again or even referenced outside of Barding because, like, Barding is not really an important character in the story. He kind of pops up here and there, but he's not really that important. So at the end of the story, when they catch Miss Manners and they find out that she was the one who basically did it, they find out, oh, she's fallen for the cutie mark too. However, one, she is such a minor character in the story that you just completely forget that she even existed. Two, her reasoning for doing it is very dumb. So Miss Manners is the etiquette teacher that is trying to teach Saria how to basically curtsy and bow and all that like a pony. But she was very, very stringent in how she presented things. And she wanted Saria to do things as a pony. So she was trying to make her pose as a pony, but she kept hating the human half because it was making things hard. And the fact that since she's a centaur and the centaur half is more anatomically correct towards regular horses, she couldn't accurately like do all the poses because she couldn't support the weight, and her hooves don't really fully articulate however how they do things, which led to Saria losing her balance and one of the trainers and basically just hitting Miss Manners with her chest, with her really gigantic chest. And apparently that was the reason why she did it. It makes sense. It's also stupid. So now we move on to the end. Would I recommend the story? That's the tough thing. I don't want to recommend the story. Here's the thing. The story has a lot of good ideas. The story has a lot of good ideas that are implemented well. But when you have to go through over half of the story just to get anywhere with the plot, that's it. You can't You simply can't defend that. And even worse, Seria's character, you have to get like around 500 to 550,000 words into the story. Do you know what I could have read the entirety of before I get any sort of development with Seria's character? The entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. I could have read all three of those books in the time it took Saria to develop even like even the minutely as a character. If if Saria if the plot and Saria's character were more better stretched out over the course of the story, I would have recommended it. But as the story is right now, I can't because it's you just stop caring when the story, like, by the time, unless you're a real diehard fan, which is what I think. Like, I don't want to talk about the fans, but this story kind of reeks of the fans not really understanding how Purple Pearls work, but is more liking the story based off the name rather than the actual quality of the story. Like, I don't know, like Core All Around with Forged Destiny. That story was absolutely shit, but people still liked it because it was written by Core All Around. But I can at least, with this story, unlike Forged Destiny, I can defend some of the issues. I can defend some of the ideas. I'm just the fact just you should not take so long to get any semblance of a plot started. It cannot, and it can't, and you should never take 500,000 plus words to even get started on a character. That is downright insulting. That is downright just, there's annoying, and then there's this. I can't. I can't. I can appreciate a lot of the ideas for the story. I can understand that this story had a lot of good ideas, and they're really done well. You just you should not wait so long to get these things started. You just can't. You really can't. What would be my favorite part of the story? Surprisingly, I liked a lot of the political stuff. I'm not a political person, but I really like the level of detail the author put into like the supremacy groups like UNET and and Miss Pandergast, and also the arsonist mindset. I think those were really well done, and you can tell that the author knows a lot about like probably like political science major. I would argue probably like really big into civics, stuff like that. And you could tell the author went the extra mile. Like, they went hard on that element, and I can really appreciate that. Like, the author just dived into it. Like, whether it be like if you want like capitalist sort of thing, or even like uh socialist communism sort of thing. Because what was that name? What was that name? What was that chapter? This one. This one, like the whole Rezimov way of subversion is like that chapter is a whole reference to that. I think I think this story honestly could have just been a political drama. Oh, that's another thing. Why is the story an adventure? This should have been drama. Like this, like the only adventure part was like at the end of the second half. Like, or they'll just add a drama tag. Anything else I would change besides just adding a drama tag? Um, Here's the thing. There is a lot you could change. Like, on one hand, I would want to say change the writing style because, but asking an author to change a writing style is to me is downright disrespectful. I would not want to ask SD to change her writing style or his writing style in any way. And I think just even suggesting that just leaves a bitter taste, just a horrible taste in my tongue. What I would suggest is simply pace out Seria's character more throughout the story. Same thing with the plot. And I think that's really it. Just add something to her character. Like I said, her on the character develop depth, that's fine. But the fact it takes so long for her to get any growth is just downright horrible. Just add like give her like some character growth, even minor, even if it's like little breadcrumbs, so that way you can connect all the dots over the course of the story. That would work too. It's really just a minor thing of adding just adding all these these small details scattered throughout the first half of the story. And that's it. At, at the very least, just add the drama tag. That's really it. But yeah, that is Daily Equestria Life with Monster Girl. I really did want to like the story. I just couldn't. It's just, I just did not care Saria as a character. I just didn't. I don't know. It's, I'm not mad at the story. I'm just massively disappointed how it turned out. I just how how painful it was. I know, like it's just. Uh, I really, I don't really know what else to say other than I really gave this story a fair shot. Like even like there's even comments of like I can't read this because of course Purple Prose is hard to read. And I wanted to give it a fair shot. It's not for me. I just couldn't care for Saria. I just I really wanted to care for her because I really resonated with her character when her core idea, her core concept as a character. But the fact that she just doesn't grow until so even suffer any character growth until so late in the story. It's just it's just a horrible thing. It was just a horrible idea to do that. Yeah, that's really all I can say about this. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and